Welcome back to Let's Talk, episode 15. Let's talk about postpartum. This is a guest I've had on before, and little does she know, she's actually my most popular episode that I've done on YouTube. This is Bella McIntire, Aaron McIntyre's wife. Bella, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Anna. How are you?
I'm doing good. Steven is doing bedtime. So, and, you know, I made a really bad mom mistake when it came to Autumn. And everybody's like, you need to rock her to sleep, because it's so cute and everything. And so I did that for like the longest time, like her whole life.
Hmm.
I'd like rock her to sleep and everything. And it was like really adorable and we'd bond. And then now I'm like heavily regretting it because now I'm stuck.
Yes.
And the doctor, we went for her 1 year old appointment and they were like, any more questions? And it was extremely uncomfortable because I felt super embarrassed. I was like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I do have one. And I told them not to judge me. And I could tell there was some judgment, but it's okay.
Oh no.
And they made it seem so much easier than they were like, sometimes they just need to let it out and cry. So I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. And that advice probably won't be taken. I'll probably be rocking her until she's like 12. Anyways,
Hey, you have to
anyway,
do what works for every family. We sleep trained our kids, but not everyone agrees with that, and that's okay. Honestly, you have to do what works best for you and for her. Eventually, she will figure out how to go to sleep. I promise. You're not going to be rocking her in college.
yeah, for real. I'm gonna be like, okay, here we go. Time to
Exactly.
move in. It became such a habit too, because then I'd take advantage of it. I'd be like, oh,
Yes.
sorry, babe, I can't do this. Oops, the baby's napping. I have to sit here and watch TikToks for like 3 hours while she naps. And now it's not as funny anymore when
Yeah.
this and then two jobs and
Right.
there's chores to be done and
Yeah, that nap time can be real nice to get some
yeah,
things done,
yeah,
but it's hard because yeah, the years are short. They really are.
yeah. Yeah, that was the hardest part. Anyways, okay, enough about that. Sorry, that was my lament. Wow, that was a lot of venting already. And
No,
this
that's
barely just
good. Hey,
began.
that's a good introduction to what we're talking about because that is part of this.
So I thought so. We kind of like touched on this a little bit the last time when we had Let's Talk About Babies. We kind of talked about all of that,
Yeah.
but I thought we'd dive into just postpartum specifically because even in my case, there were so many things that I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
going into this and things that people don't tell you or things that can differ from woman to woman or things going on with your body, whether it's physically, whether you're dealing with emotional stuff. And sometimes it can be tricky to kind of figure out because there's a lot of people in your life who want to help,
Mm-hmm.
who don't know how to help,
Yep.
or they help in their own way. And so it becomes a whole entire thing where it can be very overwhelming. And so I thought we would do a little episode, break some stuff down, and just have a conversation about it. So I thought we could just start with what does postpartum mean for people who might be, pregnant, who don't understand maybe what that means, or people who might be going through that really don't know what that means either.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think this episode is really important because there is so much focus when it comes to women's health and pregnancy that we just focus on preparing for labor. And it's, you take birth education classes, you get all the supplies, you do all the things, but no one really talks about what happens when you come home from the hospital. And I think that's honestly the greatest disservice because labor is anywhere from a couple hours to maybe a couple of days if you're an induction or something, but it is so short in comparison to the postpartum period. And so we really need to be talking about it more because the more you can prepare for postpartum, the less overwhelming it's going to seem. I mean, it's never going to, seem easy because you're recovering, you have a baby you're taking care of. It's a lot. But yeah, postpartum prep is so, so important. So what is postpartum? Basically, it technically starts as soon as you've delivered the baby and the placenta. So the second that baby is out and the placenta has been delivered, you're postpartum. This does include women who have had stillbirths or miscarriages after that has completed. You are still technically postpartum because there are hormone changes that come along with that. And the postpartum phase, if you ask an OB, they'll tell you it goes up until 6 to 8 weeks postpartum. Really, that is just the time that it takes for your uterus to shrink back down. During pregnancy, your uterus actually expands to about the size of a frozen turkey. I mean, it is huge, and it has to go back to smaller than a fist, really. So, all that 6 to 8 week time period is really just waiting for that uterus to shrink back down. It doesn't mean you're no longer postpartum. In all honesty, if you are breastfeeding, you are postpartum as long as you're breastfeeding because of the hormone changes. And even if you're not, really, it can take up to 18 months to 2 years to fully recover from a pregnancy. So you really are pretty much postpartum for a good long chunk. For a lot of women, they're basically postpartum until they get pregnant again. It just kind of depends on what your time frame is.
And so, you have a unique perspective because, of your medical background, but also a unique perspective that differs from mine because I can't imagine what it would be like to be postpartum while also having, another full-grown kid at the same time. Like it's like when you only have one, you can just kind of you have more time to rest
Yeah.
or at least semi more time to kind of take breaks or to sit down. And
Yes.
it's at this point, for lack of a better term, it's two against one. It's you and your husband, or you, or maybe, if you're a single mom, it's
Right.
you and your mom, or you and your dad, or you and your brother, or your sister, or whatever. Like you
Exactly.
have, some people to kind of help you with that. And then I can't even imagine. So talk us through a little bit, what it was like to kind of go through that yourself as a mom who already had a child.
Sure. Yeah. So it's kind of funny. Parts of it were actually easier because I feel like we had some confidence because we knew we'd already done the newborn phase once. What was overwhelming to me, at least, about the newborn phase the first time around was I didn't know how long it was all going to last. I didn't know what was on the other side. So there were nights where, we were both just desperately trying to get him to sleep and trying to get him to nurse and just feeling like, are we ever going to have a life again? Like, is this going to be our eternal existence? And then when we had Abby, it was like, no, we can get through this because we've done this before. We know this doesn't last forever. Fast forward a couple of months, we're going to be, back to hanging out, just the two of us while she goes to bed. There is peace on the other side of it. So that aspect was easier. That being said, there's always new challenges. No birth is exactly the same. No baby is exactly the same. So their temperaments were a little bit different. With Ben, he was a great nurser from the start. Abby, she was too, but it just kind of took her a little bit. She definitely cluster fed a lot more. So I just had to stay calm and remind myself of, this is normal. She's helping my milk come in. And, just be staying more calm, I guess, trying my best. But it's hard when you have at the time, a 2.5-year-old running around. And, it was difficult trying to juggle them, especially when Aaron went back to work. I remember just crying as he was leaving because I was like, I know I can take care of her by myself. I know I can take care of just him. But how am I supposed to do both of them? And so there were quite a few days where I was, sitting on the side of the tub, nursing Abby while Ben's sitting on the potty because he had to go, the second I latched her. That's just life. And I think it's just about really learning to embrace the chaos because it is just going to be chaotic for a little bit. And it's an adjustment for the older kid. They've had your attention this whole time and now they have to share it. And, now that she's almost a year old, it's gotten a lot better. But, we still have days where, Aaron will be holding Abby or something and he'll try and convince Aaron to give Abby back to me. Like, it doesn't fully go away. That being said, I have a sister. We had sibling rivalry up until like 5 years ago. So that's just life. But yeah, it's a mix of easy and harder. It's just different aspects, I would say, change with each pregnancy.
Embrace the chaos is just being a parent,
Yes.
honestly. And then but it's especially after you first give birth and then you come home
Oh,
with,
yeah.
that baby, whether you already have a child or whether it's like your first one and you come home, it's a lesson that you think but you truly don't know until a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
It just it doesn't happen until you start to get into certain situations and then you just have to embrace it, like
Yes.
when you're going through, I'm in this phase with Autumn where I just hand her different things to hold so I can do other things
Yes.
that she can't be a part of yet just because she can't stand alone yet. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like, I can bring her a step stool and say, here, watch as I do this. And so, and now every time I put her in her high chair, she wants to eat food. So I can't really do that
Yes.
anymore. So I'll just be like, here, do you want to hold this plastic spatula? Here, do you want to
Yes.
hold your toothbrush? Okay. Oh, you're putting that in your mouth.
Right?
Okay. Well, give me 5 minutes, and that
Exactly.
just
Yes.
embracing the chaos at this
Yes.
point.
Yeah, you
But I
just
want to
have to.
backtrack a little bit. I feel like I got ahead of myself. What is so okay, so let's talk about postpartum, in the hospital because that was something that I was not ready for
Yeah.
at all. I'll never forget, after giving birth to Autumn and doing all the things and everything, and time had passed, and they were like, all right, let's bring you to the bathroom. And
Mm.
I'm like, okay. And I kind of get up with them. I'm like, all right, they get paid for this stuff. So, and they were like, we're going to teach you how to make your little padsicle.
Yes.
And I'm looking at them, I'm like, I don't really know what you're talking about. And they had to teach it to me, and it was the entire worst. So
Yes.
walk us through a little bit, what does postpartum look like, directly after, when you're kind of still fresh, if you will,
Yes.
for lack of a better finding of my words.
No, I think that's actually a very good word for it. Yeah, it's well, we talked about embracing the chaos, and honestly, it starts right there because I think, especially working in the hospital, I had a lot of patients who just thought they were gonna push, deliver the baby, and then they just cuddle and nurse, and it was gonna be great. No, you're gonna be basically interrupted frequently, and eventually it'll space out to a couple of hours, and then when you finally think, oh great, we're getting a break, you get your discharge papers. So just go into it knowing that you are going to feel like it's a revolving door and there is always someone coming in, someone needing to do something, wanting to give you something, wanting to talk about something, which is why my piece of advice is try to limit family in the hospital if you can. You'll be home in a couple of days. There'll be plenty of time.
100%. 100%
You
agree with you
just
on that.
don't need them. I know everyone is so excited, but we have this beautiful thing called FaceTime or Skype, whatever you want to
Yes.
use. Send pictures, send videos, but just you have so many interruptions in the hospital that the last thing you want is a whole crowd of people coming in
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to hold the baby, and it just, oh my gosh, it's so overstimulating. The staff are overstimulating enough. And believe me, we feel bad doing it, but unfortunately, there are important things that they're doing. So try and keep family to the wayside if you can. But as far as what to expect from staff, I mean, immediately after you deliver, they're going to be checking your uterus every 15 minutes for 2 hours. So it's called a fundal massage is what they do when they're like aggressively rubbing it. That's not quite accurate as far as what they're normally doing. Mostly it should just be like a gentle push just to make sure it's staying firm. What they're checking is that uterus, like I said, it expands rapidly during pregnancy, and we need it to start shrinking down and moving down lower in your pelvis, because when you deliver, it's like above your belly button basically, and we want it to shrink back down below your belly button. So that's what they're checking. We want it to be nice and firm. We don't want it to be what's called boggy. If you think if you go outside and you feel grass after it rains and how the ground is kind of boggy feeling, we don't want that in a uterus. If that's happening, then that means that uterus is not contracting as it should, and that is a concern. And so that's where they would need to do fundal massage, which is where they're like aggressively rubbing that uterus. Hopefully they're not doing that. Hopefully it's just a nice fundal check, but that continues every 15 minutes for 2 hours. And then after that, it'll space out. They'll do like an hour check, and it's every 4 hours. And then it continues to space out the longer that you're there. You mentioned getting up to the bathroom. If you deliver without an epidural, you can pretty much get up and go to the bathroom whenever. There's really no rhyme or reason as long as vitals are looking good and you're feeling okay. If you have an epidural, they'll usually try to do it at the end of that 2 hour recovery period. That's just for a couple of reasons. One, we want to make sure that bleeding is under control before we get up. Two, they shut off that epidural as soon as the baby is out, and it takes a little bit for your legs to kind of wake back up, get some sensation, get your strength back. And it's not uncommon for some women to actually need like a lift to get them to the bathroom. It's called a Steady. It's basically like a chair on wheels that they can use to take you there. The reason that they're so adamant about getting you to go to the bathroom is for a couple of reasons. One, it feels nicer to have underwear on instead of just bleeding on the bed, because you are bleeding and you will be for the next 6 to 8 weeks. But two, it's really important to get your bladder emptied. I mentioned earlier we need that uterus to clamp down, and if your bladder is full, it will actually displace your uterus and prevent it from clamping down. So we need that bladder emptied. If you're not able to go, they'll kind of keep an eye on it, have you keep hydrating, and then let you try again after a little while. If you still can't, that's where they would need to potentially use a catheter to try and empty your bladder. Very rare, but there are some women, it just takes their bladder a little bit of time to wake up, and then they're fine. So those are kind of the checks. They're also coming in, taking your blood pressure is on an automatic blood pressure cuff that's going off every 15 minutes. They're probably offering you some ibuprofen as well, especially once that epidural is worn off, because you do tend to get pretty sore. They'll usually put an ice pack on your vaginal area. And that's really a lot of what they're doing. So this is what I mean by overstimulation. It's a ton of checks. And that's not even everything they do after a C-section, because a C-section is basically all of those same fundal checks, all of that, but also checking out your C-section incision and managing that. So this is just, it's lots of touching, lots of people coming in, and then another nurse is coming in to check on your baby every half hour. So this is what I'm saying. It's a lot of people. Try and keep everyone else out if you can.
Yeah, there were a couple things you said there that I wanted to touch on. Specifically, we'll do the bleeding first.
Yeah.
I don't know so you said earlier, you're so focused when you're pregnant on just being pregnant.
Yeah.
You don't think about after. I remember holding Autumn afterwards.
Yeah.
And just being like, okay, wow. Okay, I kind of forgot that this is how this ended, that I have to take you home. And I don't even mean that. I mean that as a joke, but also seriously, because you are so focused on making sure you eat right, making sure you walk, making sure you don't walk too much, making sure you lift, but don't lift too much. It's like you're so focused on being a pregnant woman that you're not focused on being a mom. Exactly. And so things as simple as, after you give birth, you're going to bleed. I didn't even register in my brain that I was probably going to have to, physically take care of myself afterwards. You kind of just are like, oh, I'm going to give birth and then we're going to head out, or oh, I'm so focused on being pregnant. And so the bleeding was something that I wasn't prepared for. The, making your own, like I had seen people do it, but it was so out of sight, out of mind, because you're putting it off because you're like, I need to focus on sleeping for more than 2 hours straight tonight. That's my goal, And so just the bleeding was something I wasn't expecting. And, when after I gave birth to Autumn, I tore, so they had to kind of sew me up. And I'll never forget, one of the nurses was like, I have to leave the room. There's so much blood. I think I'm going to pass out.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, wait, what? My newborn baby trance was gone. I was like, wait, what did you say? Wait a second. No. Wait, what? It was the worst. It was so terrifying. Gosh. But everybody else was great.
Okay, good. Oh, I'm sorry. They should not have said that out loud. Oh my gosh.
And the second thing that you said that I wanted to touch on as well is I wrote down just boundaries. That's kind of what I was writing down as you were talking. Yeah. Stephen and I made the decision early on that we were not going to have anybody visit, and it honestly created some conflict.
Yeah.
There were people that weren't thrilled.
Yep.
But it was something that I tell Stephen too. I said, when we have another kid, I'm doing the exact same thing, where there's no way, unless it's like, hey, sister, can you bring me this? I want to eat this. Or I forgot this at home. Can one person bring me this for the purpose of bringing it? If you see the baby while you're here, that's totally fine. But then get out.
Right. You're not holding her.
Also, quick story. So I was actually getting my hair done by some lady, I don't remember, a few months ago.
Yeah.
And we realized our babies were only a few months apart, just like you and I's.
Yeah.
And so we were talking, classic mom. We were like, oh, how much did your baby weigh? How much did, all the stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And she was telling me that, when she was going into labor, her father-in-law refused to leave the room and actually sat at the end of her bed, and that her husband refused to ask him to leave. And once he finally got the certain body parts to ask him to leave, the father-in-law said, I'm not leaving unless you leave. And so the husband actually left with his dad while his wife was in labor, and they went and got food and brought it back as she was in labor. And hearing that, it made me grateful that Stephen and I set boundaries and we stuck to them. But it can be tricky when you're in those situations because people will really try to guilt trip you,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
even when your baby is first born and
Yep.
we didn't have anybody come visit Autumn until she was a week old. We were
Mm-hmm.
like, we need to get a week under our belts.
Yeah.
We need to learn what we're doing. We need to get a routine down. That way, when other people come into our routine, we are set and everybody's different.
Right.
But, what is your advice to? So, you also, again, have kind of dual experience with this.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen kind of, you're the person that's trying to get through the family members to check on, the women as they're going through this postpartum, but you've also been the woman postpartum having to set boundaries with family. So, what is your
Yeah.
advice to women who struggle to set those boundaries or who might be going into this period in their life where they're like, I want to set boundaries before my daughter or my son
Mm-hmm.
come?
Absolutely. Honestly, I sometimes felt a little bit like a therapist talking to some of my patients because this would come up so much. I remember distinctly this one patient who she and her husband did not want family to come. And so her family, or I don't know, it was one of their parents. I don't know which side it was, but one of them worked nearby and he would just drive his car up and down the street and call them and say, hey, can I come up and see the baby? And they were like, no, no, like this is still our boundary. And
Oh my
he got like
gosh.
so mad at them, but he was just like driving around, just like circling like a vulture, just wanting to swoop in. And so, yeah, I remember talking with them and had several other patients about like, this is welcome to parenthood. You're going to have to set boundaries with your kids and you're going to have to set boundaries with your family. I know that
Mm-hmm.
they want to come see this baby and that's so wonderful that they're so excited, but you're going to be home in just like a day or two. They can hang on. So yeah, that was always my advice was just, reminding them of how close they are to getting out, but also reminding them of the big picture that, this is kind of your first test really as parents is can you set that boundary? And really the biggest and most important thing is just staying on the same page. That if you are saying, hey, I really don't want anyone to come, your husband or your significant other cannot undermine you and go, oh, well, what about my mom? She's already outside the door. She wants to come see. No, you guys need to be on the same page. And, that is really important. And just set those clear, firm boundaries. You can do it in a kind way. Grandparents sometimes freak out when they think they're not going to be there for the delivery. But honestly, at that moment really isn't about them as much as it, pains them. It really isn't. It really is more about you and your significant other or whoever your support person is and the baby. You can tell them we're not doing visitors in the hospital. It's nothing personal. We're not, excluding you. We just want to have this time as a new family of 3 and we want to have this time together and we will be home on this date. And if you just give us a day to get settled in, we will be more than happy to have you over. Here are some other things we can do. We will send you pictures as soon as we are able. We will send you videos. We would be more than happy to FaceTime because there is quite a bit of downtime once you get out of that initial recovery period. And it is just so much easier. Honestly, it's easier for the families and as the staff, we really appreciate it too because there is nothing more awkward than coming into the room, needing to push on a woman's belly and look at her genitals and check everything out when like her dad is just like sitting there. And there were some creepy dads that just, and I don't know if they were creepy or if they were just oblivious, but I'm like, okay, I need to lift the sheet to look. I'm going to close
Yeah.
this curtain. They're like, oh, that's okay. I just won't look. Or they were like kind of looking off in the distance. And I'm like, I don't know if you're looking at me or your daughter's private
Yeah.
parts, but this is really uncomfortable. So please don't do that. So, yeah, it's just better for everyone if there's just a little bit of space. If you get out of the recovery period and you're feeling good and you've gotten a little rest, fine. If you like to have some visitors, that is your prerogative. But my advice is please, please, please let yourself get through the 2-hour recovery period before you start inviting people in. It's a lot for everybody.
And it's just you're going through I don't know. I don't even know how to explain this. It's I felt so weird, after I gave birth. And
Mm-hmm.
even somebody said this, and we'll get to those a little bit later, some people's comments on just their postpartum experience, but you feel way different
Yes.
after you give birth. And obviously, and sometimes it takes a little longer, I know, for some women to bond with their babies or to feel happy, just
Mm-hmm.
because of how crazy their emotions are,
Oh, yeah.
and so it wasn't that for me, I had that immediate attachment to Autumn. I was very happy. But there were definitely moments, and it more so set in once I got home
Mm-hmm.
that, and I've dealt with anxiety my whole life, and I do have like a history of like self-harm issues and like self body and like just
Mm,
self-esteem issues. And when I got home and all that, and my husband was here, but all the help that the nurses give you, you can just
mm-hmm.
ring a little remote and they bring you your food, or
Yep.
you can ring a little thing and then you can ask them whatever you want. You get home and you're like, it's all on me, especially when your husband or your support person goes back to work or they have to leave
Yep.
and it's just you. My emotions were crazy. So what happens to our bodies, afterwards? Because I've heard, is like that our hormones just like completely plummet. Is that
Yep.
true? Like what is going on emotionally after we give birth?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really blame a lot of the tough parts of postpartum on our hormones, especially because during pregnancy, our hormone levels are at like all time highs. So the main ones are estrogen and progesterone. So those hormones are so important for pregnancy. I mean, progesterone, you break it down, it's progestation. It's what helps grow the baby. It's eventually your body produces it the first 12 weeks and then your placenta takes over. And so you just have these high levels of these hormones. And it's wonderful. It's why some women actually will feel less anxious during pregnancy compared to when they're not pregnant. It's because they have super high progesterone levels. Granted, not every woman feels that way, but that can be why. And then, yeah, you kind of are coasting along, you give birth, and then as soon as that placenta comes out, because that's what's been producing those high levels of progesterone, everything drops. And you basically go into menopause, if you will, with your hormone levels. And so, yeah, as that goes, those levels just drop right down. And then if you start breastfeeding, your body starts secreting a hormone called prolactin. And prolactin is what produces the milk. And obviously that's important. But as those prolactin levels go up, it actually brings your estrogen levels down even further. So we have like very minimal progesterone, and then if you just start breastfeeding, any progesterone that you're starting to get kind of starts going back down. So yeah, that's why a lot of women will experience things like irritability, anxiety, insomnia, PMS, irregular cycles, postpartum. A lot of that is because there's just no progesterone. And as that progesterone goes down, it's not uncommon for that estrogen to actually start going up. And so then that can actually lead to some more of those symptoms. So that's a big cause for a lot of those changes in postpartum. Anxiety and depression, it's really a combination of hormone changes, but also just it is a significant stress. I mean, it's a very new thing, especially if it's a first baby. You've never done this
Mm.
before, it's a steep learning curve. And then with the second baby, that part's, maybe not as unfamiliar, but you're juggling too. And so that is another reason why you can start to see those creep in. Kind of another interesting one is, have you ever heard of postpartum rage?
Yes, I have heard of that.
Okay. So I think this one is very interesting because it really was not classified as a mood disruption until recently. Like they're finally starting to talk about it more. And this one is manifesting as quick onset anger, frustration, anger,
Mm-hmm.
shouting, kicking, hitting. And that one can show up in the weeks after giving birth or even several months after. It's kind of interesting because this one is a mix of the hormones, but it's also usually a sign that the mom is not being supported. So that means that maybe she's not getting what she needs from her support person, doesn't really have a village around her, feeling overwhelmed. And 9 times out of 10, if she gets some help to kind of juggle the load and maybe take care of herself a little bit better, those feelings of rage will start to kind of diminish a little bit. But it's not easy managing your mood when you have a little tiny human that needs you 24/7.
And and I think that really plays into we were talking about boundaries. I think
Yes.
you also have to set boundaries with yourself. And this is something that I struggle with even when I didn't have a baby, which was knowing what was my limit, knowing
Mm-hmm.
what was too much for myself. Because I know that, some women, I feel like you might have mentioned this actually, where you like rested for 3 days. You know what I'm talking
Oh, the
about? And then
five five
you,
five.
yes, yes. And I did not. I pushed myself way too fast to try to feel better.
Yep.
And, like I'd be like, okay, we need to run errands instead of you just going like, I'm going to go too and try to get this going.
Yeah.
And I think that also plays into, you know, having anxiety and being stressed and not
Yep.
being, ready to handle your emotions better because I
Mm-hmm.
tried to push myself way too fast, way too far.
Yes.
And so we talked about boundaries with family members and boundaries with friends and all of that, and that's important.
Mm-hmm.
How do you set boundaries for yourself? Because it's hard when, if you're somebody like me, I expect a lot from myself and
Yep.
I want to be the best always. And so it can be hard sometimes when that's not happening, when your body is not doing what you want it to do, whether that's, and things like, and it can be kind of humiliating in a sense. And I don't mean that
Yeah.
to be degrading, but it's like you go to the bathroom and you can't even just go to the bathroom
Yes.
anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
It
saying? You
takes you
can't
20
even just
minutes.
yeah, you can't just be a woman who goes to the bathroom, takes a
Yep.
quick pee, and heads out. It's a whole freaking, you gotta grab the size
Yes.
800 pad and then, and think pads I've never even bought before that I didn't even know exist.
Right?
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
products I didn't even know existed.
Mm-hmm.
I hear baby crying and
Yep.
people are like, what do I do? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm adding my eighth witch hazel pad. Give me 5 seconds. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
how do you set these boundaries with yourself? What's your advice about that? And tell us about the 555 rule and all that too.
Yeah, absolutely, because they really go hand in hand. So, as far as what I did to set boundaries with myself, when I had Ben, I really did not set any boundaries. And I just kind of tried, I was a lot like you. I just tried to jump back in. I honestly, I chalk a lot of it up to being that, firstborn daughter. I have to go and do things. I have to prove that I can do
Yep.
things.
Yep.
People are counting on me. And in all reality, no one really needed me to run to the grocery store 2 days postpartum. That was not necessary.
Yes. Yes.
So silly. So when I had Abby, I was much more realistic with myself. And so it was a lot of, when I was feeling those feelings come up, having those thoughts of like, oh, I should be doing this stuff. I should be doing these things. Just taking a step back, taking a deep breath and going, no, what I need to know right now is what can I actually do? What am I physically capable of? And what can I delegate? And so that can be hard, especially for those of us that are go-getters and have high standards. It is hard to delegate because you're thinking, well, they could do it, but they're not going to do it the same way as me. But you have to let go of that and you just have to accept that, you know what, right now, I need to send my husband to the store. I need to ask him to throw in a load of laundry. It's not going to kill him. He knows how to do it. He's a big boy. And it's okay if I sit here and hold the baby and rest because I am recovering. So there's a lot of just really mindfulness, just staying grounded. And when those thoughts come up, not listening to what they're trying to tell me about who I am. It's not a judgment on me. It's nothing I'm doing wrong. This is just where I'm at and it's temporary. And I think that's the benefit of having been through it before is, I know there is a day where I will be able to do all of the things that I want to do. It's just not happening right now. And I feel like that ties in really well actually to the 555 rule. So this is something that is kind of adapted from a lot of Eastern cultures and more traditional cultures. They will do a 40-day lie-in, which is where women basically stay in bed for about 40 days while they were recovering. And so what that looks like is people will bring them food. Usually it's mothers or mother-in-laws will bring them food. Someone else will do the laundry. Someone will basically take, care of the baby until they need to be fed, or the mom is co-sleeping with the baby. That's how they do it in a lot of these cultures, or you can do a bedside bassinet, whatever your jam is. But the whole idea is that it took your body 9 months to grow a baby, so you need to give it some time to heal. And so this 555 rule is kind of a modified version because a lot of us really cannot commit to staying in bed for 40 days. Plus, I also...
Oh no, I could never.
Right? I'm like, that just seems so intense. I mean, very cool, but no thank you. I also worry about blood clots. I'm like, that is just a long time to be lying down. But the 555 rule is kind of a modified version. So it's 5 days in the bed, 5 days on the bed, and 5 days near the bed. So 5 days in the bed, and that includes the time in the hospital. So you can include those 1 to 2 days that you're there. Really, you are just in the bed. You're resting, doing lots of skin to skin, bonding with baby. You really should only be getting up to use the bathroom, take a shower really quick, do a sitz bath if you had a vaginal delivery, or grab something that you need that's like right there in your room. So like a new pair of pajamas or something like that. But for those 5 days, try to ask for help as far as getting food, laundry. Don't be cleaning, don't be running errands, don't be going places. Really try and stay bathroom and bed. Kind of the goal for those days. For 5 days on the bed, still mostly trying to stay on the bed, but you can sit up more. So like think about sitting up in bed, sitting at the edge of the bed, laying on your side. You can invite, if you have older kids, they can come in and play with you on the bed. You can read them books. You can let them hold the baby if you're right there on the bed with them. So you could also, some people will extend this to sitting up in a chair for very short periods of time. So you could, get a comfy chair and go sit on the deck and get some sunlight, like something like that would be fine. But really try not to push it too much. And then the last one is 5 days near the bed. So standing for no more than 30 minutes at a time. So it'd be okay to like throw in a quick load of laundry, but then go lay right back down. Make a quick snack, have a short visit with family while you're sitting on a very comfy couch with lots of blankets and pillows. The big idea here, though, is that if your bleeding starts to increase, then take it back to staying on the bed. So really just kind of watching your symptoms and how you're feeling to see if you can progress. And then after you've done those 5 days, which really is about just over 2 weeks, at that point you can start adding in more activity. I realize this is not exactly practical if you have lots of other kids or your support person has to go back to work after like a week. But if you're able to, even just doing a modified version of this, you will feel a lot better. I didn't do a full 5-5-5. Well, I for sure did not do it with Ben. But with Abby, I did kind of a modified version. I did the best I could. And I really did notice a big difference. Just being able to rest more. I felt like, well, my bleeding definitely was much shorter. I had much less discomfort. Breastfeeding was great. And I just felt like I could recover and bounce back a little bit easier. So I do think it works. I do think it helps. But yeah, it does take a lot of planning and a lot of forethought. So it's not something you can just, get home from the hospital and, okay, I'm going to be here for, 15 days. Your significant others and be like, what the heck? We have nothing ready.
Yeah.
Like you have to plan this ahead of time. So it's just something to look into and research before you give birth.
I think back, that's like one of the only things I would do different after I gave birth is just rest, especially like laying down
Yes.
more. I remember I tried to sit up a lot. It was so painful. I used to have to like sit on a pillow because I refused to lie down because I needed to help or I needed to be doing things.
Yes.
And I regret that a lot. And just even thinking about it is making my whole body cringe. Anyway,
Right? Yes.
so we touched on it a little bit about at the beginning how you're in the bathroom and you're putting on your 8th witch hazel pad and some women are laughing and some women are reminiscing about funny times and other women are like, what are you talking about?
Yes.
That would have been me because I had no idea. And I think we talked about this the last time too, how your gift to me at my baby shower was a lot of that kind of stuff and I just didn't understand.
Yes.
And I'm sure like in the back of your mind it was, like maniacal laughter of,
Not
the
gonna lie. I did have a little giggle.
Just laughing to yourself like, oh, you silly little one, you silly young one.
Well,
So-
it just what cracked me up is how quickly you're trying to put it back in the bag. You're like, oh, that's nice, and just put it back. I'm like, I know. You don't want to think about it now. You don't think you're gonna need it, but the second
Little
you get
do
home,
you know,
it's your
the
BFF.
smell of dermoplast in the morning
My gosh.
will be your new on the reg.
I actually love the smell of witch hazel. I really do.
It really wasn't bad, honestly. You kind of just get used to it.
You do.
And honestly, I'm not even trying to be weird when I say this. When you are in, and not really pain, just very sore, and it's a very different feeling than you're used to.
Yes.
And you put on that, and then those cold witch hazel pads. 5 out of 5.
Yes.
That's a 5 out of 5. And it freaked me
amazing.
out at first. And then I put it on. I was like, okay. I'm living. I'd like honestly be so. I'd be like, oops, you gotta go to the bathroom again. In the back of my mind, I'm like, heck yeah, here we go, because it felt so nice. And so,
is.
talk to us about that. What is it like why do we have to wear those? You know, what is the secret behind dermoplast and witch hazel pads? And then maybe give a little, not a whole tutorial, but maybe like how does that one go about, making them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, after you give birth and you get up to the bathroom and they're getting your fancy new underwear all set up,
Yeah.
they,
Speaking of that, before
oh
you talk,
my
oh
gosh,
my
the
God,
underwear, they are, oh my gosh, they're like granny panties. They're just like the
they are.
stretchiest things. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not cute, but honestly, they're very functional. Like they
And they
serve a
were the ones
purpose.
I got in the hospital, they were white.
Yes.
Those I tried to use what is it, the Frida brand,
Oh yeah.
and those are like Spanx. I don't know about anybody else. Those
Oh
felt like
yeah.
Spanx. I
Yes.
was like, I was like, oh, here we go. I was like, wow, okay. I was like, wow, I'm not even getting dressed in real clothes and I'm already self-conscious. The white
Right?
ones, though, they gave me in the hospital.
Yeah.
I did the classic, like I shoved so many of those in my bag.
Yes.
And then they came and they were like, oh, are you out? And I was like, yes. And they're like, we'll bring you more. And I was like, okay.
Yes.
They brought me like a freaking like 15 more and I shoved them in my bag. And
Nice.
I was like, thanks.
Yes.
Anyways, I'm sorry. I
I
didn't mean
love
to
that.
interrupt.
No, that's a very good tip too. Just make sure take all the supplies because honestly, if it's in your room and it's open, they can't reuse it for another patient. So take all the pads and undies and everything you can get. But yeah, so they do your first time out to the bathroom, they give you the granny panties, they give you this ginormous looking pad. I mean, it fills like the entire underwear. It feels aggressive, and you're kind of thinking, I'm surely not going to need this. Yes, you will. And then they will give you a peri bottle. So it's like a little squeeze bottle with kind of a special nozzle on top. And that's to clean your vaginal area because you really don't want to be wiping aggressively with toilet paper, especially if you had any tears because there are stitches down there. Those stitches will dissolve in a few weeks. Like you're not really going to hurt them. It just won't feel great for you. So you can kind of dab with toilet paper, but you'll be using that peri bottle, kind of squeeze down there, get everything as cleaned up as you can. You're still going to be dribbling blood. It's like when you're on your period and, you got a heavy flow for a day or something and it feels like you're just bleeding a ton. Kind of that same thing. You're going to get all cleaned up, stand up, and there's going to be blood in your underwear. But once they get you all cleaned up at the peri bottle, they will give you dermaplast or just another numbing spray is essentially what it is. And you just kind of spray that front to back. And that just helps kind of decrease some of the sensation. It's not going to take away the pain completely, but at least helps take away some of the sting. And then they'll give you witch hazel pads. They're these kind of round, honestly, they kind of look like big white pepperonis. It's really the best way I can describe them. And you'll just
That
throw
is so true. That's very true.
they feel great, but they don't like to stay in place. I always tell my patients, like, it's not rude if you have to like pick your wedgie after we stand up because they just they like to move around a little bit. But try and put a couple of those in your underwear, and it should kind of hit your vagina, your perineum, and a little bit of your anus. That's completely fine. It's really what those are trying to do. Witch hazel is anti-inflammatory, so it's trying to help shrink back down some of that inflammation that you've got going on, some of that swelling. It's honestly the reason I say you should put it as far back as your rectum is it's not uncommon to get hemorrhoids, and so the witch hazel can really help with that as well. But yeah, so you put on your granny panties, your big old pad, do the numbing spray, put on the witch hazel pads, pull up your pants, and then that's that. It feels like it takes an eternity. Eventually you'll get faster at it and it won't take quite as long, but it feels a little overwhelming at first. And then in the hospital, in the first couple hours afterwards, they'll usually give you an ice pack to put on your perineum. So that honestly, what we did in the hospital is just fill a diaper full of ice. That's our fancy padsicle. You can also make padsicles at home and just you can soak them in witch hazel and then put them in the freezer and then put those in. They're really nice like the first day or so. After that, I don't feel like they give a whole lot of benefit. But the witch hazel and the numbing spray are kind of your go-tos after that.
Yeah, let's just say you're not as Justin Timberlake used to say, bringing your sexy back anytime soon.
Oh gosh, no.
Because that also
No.
just does so much for the hormones too. Because
Mm-hmm.
you've been looking like a cow
Yep.
the last couple of months as things are going,
Yep.
and then you give birth, and your body definitely doesn't go back to normal right away. Mine took
No.
what felt like, honestly, it felt like just into like the end of last year I
Mm-hmm.
started to feel like myself, and autumn is now one. So
Yeah.
almost all the way up until then is when I actually find it, like, especially just because you're doing so much and trying to figure out so much, the last thing you're thinking about is, working out or
Right.
doing all this stuff. And, walks can be great, but then it's like, what am I going to be? You're walking around like looking like, a dude with his pants hanging off his
Right.
butt because of the, the pattern, like you're
Well,
not, and you're
yeah.
also not doing a lot of that kind of stuff.
Mm-mm.
So it can be hard. And wearing that stuff, it's just like, I'll never forget, wearing the, like ice pads around
Yes.
and just, people would know when you're coming in the room
Yes.
because you can hear that. And you're definitely not wearing, tight, cute yoga
Oh
pants
no.
anymore.
No. 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 And I would have patients that would try and like their going home outfit was like tight yoga pants or like jeans. And like, is there
Yeah.
anything else you can possibly
Yeah.
wear? Because they would be like, yeah, this doesn't feel great. Girl, get some sweatpants. You don't have
Yeah.
anybody to impress right now. And like,
No.
it doesn't help that there's a lot of like you just alluded to, there's a lot of body changes that happen as a result of these
Mhm.
hormones. I mean, your ribs flare because they're having to accommodate that belly growing. Your glutes get tight and they may feel kind of weak just because, you've had an altered center of gravity with having that big old belly out in front. It's not uncommon to have more upper back and shoulder tightness because you're leaning over. Your pelvic floor is recovering. And so, that can lead to issues too. So you kind of feel like, I don't know, you're waddling around and then you're also like a hunchback. So there's just nothing cute about any of this. And it takes a long time. It really does. And, like I said, you really are postpartum, as long as you're nursing. So if you're lactating, you are still technically postpartum because your hormone levels are all wonky. And even once you're done breastfeeding or pumping or whatever you're doing, it can still take, 18 months, sometimes up to 2 years for your body to get back to normal. And that's why this whole idea of bounce back culture just drives me up the wall because there is no hurry to quote unquote bounce back, nor should that be an expectation. You grew a human, you're taking care of the human, take care of your body, do the things that you need to do, but don't worry about what, looking like some super skinny Instagram model who's never, pushed out a bowling ball before. There's very different expectations that we need to be having.
Yeah, and you just got to give yourself grace, and
Mm-hmm.
it fluctuates too. You come home and all of your clothes are stretched out from being pregnant. And so
Yep.
and I'm dealing with this, is as you start to, maybe prioritize your health, you've gotten to a point where you are down with the routine, your baby's older, you're like, okay, I have more time now to do that kind of stuff. It's like it's such a crazy mind game. Your clothes
Mm-hmm.
don't fit the same.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is different. Everything's either way too big or way too small.
Yep.
And you just have to give yourself grace during that time. And so,
Mm-hmm.
talking about, recovering and all of that stuff. So, I feel like I've been hearing this term a lot. Getting your pink back is kind of something that I hear a lot
Mm-hmm.
about once you've kind of, and like I was talking about, once you've kind of gotten your routine down, your baby is older. And I mean, like I said, I don't feel like I was really, getting my pink back, which I take to mean, really becoming yourself again, not
Mm-hmm.
just becoming mom, not becoming pregnant Anna, not
Yes.
becoming postpartum Anna necessarily, but kind of becoming just Anna again. And, maybe prioritizing your health, like I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
prioritizing, maybe washing your hair on a regular basis, like things like that. It's kind of getting your pink back.
Yeah.
You know, it, I really haven't felt like I was doing that until even just a few months ago
Mm-hmm.
with autumn.
Yeah.
What does getting your pink back mean to you? What is your advice to women on getting that back? Do you think that that's like a real thing, getting your pink back? Like, kind of talk to me a little bit about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is actually really cool. So the whole idea of getting your pink back refers to flamingos because as the mothers are pregnant, they lose their pink color, and so they actually change from that bright pink to more white. And their kids are born pink, and so as their kids grow up, the moms eventually get that pink color back. So that's kind of where that phrase has come from, and I think that's really
I
cool.
did not know that.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like that. I always just
Yeah.
kind of took it to mean since you're a lady, they equate ladies with pink. So I was like, okay,
Right.
cool, whatever. But that's way cooler than what I thought.
Yeah, yeah, I thought that was so interesting because I heard that a few years ago, and yeah, because I know there's like a whole company out there that sells sweatshirts with "Get Your Pink Back," and that's where that came from. Um, but yeah, so this is something that all women experience, whether or not they realize it, because you do lose yourself in motherhood a bit, especially in that first year. Kind of talked about this before. You're placing that baby's needs above your own. It's a sacrificial love. It's so beautiful. But eventually, you hit a point where you're like, whoa, wait a second. Like, who am I outside of being a mom? And I saw this Instagram post from this midwife I absolutely love. And she said, the discomfort of pregnancy prepares us for the discomfort of birth, and the discomfort of birth prepares us for the discomfort of motherhood. This discomfort is where the growth happens. And I think that sums this up so well because motherhood, pregnancy, all of it is so difficult, but it is such an opportunity to grow and to become something new and better and to see the work that God is doing in us through motherhood, that even on the really, really hard days, He has a plan for us. And as challenging as it is, it can be really fun to find yourself. Once the fog has kind of lifted, you get to see how the experience shaped you, what interests emerge, what motivates you. You may be similar to who you were before, or you may be someone completely new. I mean, my goodness gracious, I switched career paths after having Ben. I never thought I would work in labor and delivery. I hated labor and delivery clinicals in nursing school. I thought it was horrible. I was so bored with the cares and overwhelmed. I thought, oh, this is so dumb. I don't really understand this. Like, this is not for me. And then I had Ben. I was like, I have to be a labor and delivery nurse. Like, I cannot do anything else. And I really do think that was, part of me getting my pink back was figuring out something I'm passionate about. And now, here I am. He'll be 4 in August and I haven't shut up about birth yet. So, I just think it's really cool how you can find yourself through this process. And really that is my best advice, is just being honest, like what interests you. You can journal about it, you can talk about it, research, just figure out what fuels you. And finding what those interests are and figuring out ways to make time for yourself. That is the hardest thing, and it's something I still struggle with. So I'm not going to, sit here and you should be doing this. No, like we all struggle with it. It's hard sometimes to say, hey, I need to go be by myself for a couple of hours, especially if you're breastfeeding. That is really hard. But as they get older, it does get easier. But just trying to find those opportunities to, be by yourself, to prioritize a workout if that's what makes you feel good, to get back to doing hobbies. Or if it's just having alone time at night, you're like, hey, you know what? Every Friday night, I just want to take a bath by myself and read a book and listen to some relaxing music and pretend I'm not a mom for a couple of hours. If there's, notifications on the cameras, can you go tend to it? Definitely not speaking from personal experience or anything. Just whatever makes you feel good. Just finding those little things, because those little things are, eventually going to lead to bigger things. And, you may learn some things, not only about yourself, but about motherhood. And honestly, I really think it deepens your faith too, because you see that, see God's hand in things and see what he's doing with your life.
This is me writing down, tell Steven every Friday night I am now going to be taking a bath and reading a book, and
Yes.
good luck.
Right?
Because I really, really, and it's what you said earlier. It's that oldest sibling mentality
Yes.
for me, 100%, especially, being homeschooled.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was basically, like assistant,
Yeah.
to the regional manager. Okay. Like it was me.
Yes.
Like I was like, okay, here we go. And, that was my day. Like I'd wake up, I'd help with everything,
Yep.
and it's hard to prioritize yourself, especially
Yep.
because I find myself, even with things like just tonight, for example, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to wash my hair because it had been a couple days. And I find myself, going up to Steven being like, listen, I did this, I did this, I did this. Is it okay if I go and wash my hair? It's
Yep.
like, he's like, yeah,
Yes.
just go wash your hair. I'm like, okay, do you need me to do this or this?
Yep.
And even before I did it, I like went and switched the laundry. I went and like
Mm-hmm.
swept the floor. I was like, why am I doing all of this
Yeah.
stuff? I'm like, and I'm not asking to go, take a personal vacation for a
Right.
week in a different country. I'm asking you to go in the bathroom that is in our 800 square foot house. So it's
Right.
literally right across the hall just so I can go and wash my hair.
Right.
And so it's so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of, bleeds into well, before that, in with when you were talking about hobbies and finding things that really interest you and everything. Sorry, I thought I saw a bug on the wall, and my true, like my final form, my final Steve Dace form was coming out, and I was
Oh
about to be like, call
no.
the police. Anyways, but I'm gonna leave this in 100% because
Oh,
that was
you
funny.
should 100%.
Um, but anyways, you really, when you don't have a child, take things for granted, such
Mm-hmm.
as just reading a book, such as just sitting down and watching a movie. And those things become so much more difficult. And so it can be hard sometimes to have a negative mentality when it comes to planning ahead for hobbies. But I've actually found for myself, I find, great joy in them because then I actually don't take them for granted anymore. Things such
Mm-hmm.
as even recording this podcast,
Yeah.
or, I do a radio show now locally here in Pella,
Mm-hmm.
and I get up early every morning to record it, and I found so much joy in that, just on purpose, like having purposeful hobbies
Yeah.
that fill me with joy that don't involve, you know, making a bottle or
Yes.
doing things that don't involve doing chores around the house that involve me. It has helped me so much to not take them for granted and just be
Yes.
blessed by the fact that I have the time to do those
Oh,
kinds of things.
exactly.
However, it can make you feel guilty, like I was talking about.
Yes.
And so, I think postpartum guilt is a huge thing. And I feel like I could title that as the episode because
Yeah.
we've brought it up so many times.
Yeah.
I feel guilty for going to the bathroom and taking care of myself. I
Yep.
feel guilty for laying down on the bed and taking care of myself, even though I just pushed out a 8-pound child and now
Yes.
I have to take care of said child. But God forbid I lay on the bed and nap for an hour. Like, what is your advice to women who struggle with that, postpartum guilt?
Yeah, it is so common. And I think a lot of it is us as women that we feel this natural urge to. I don't know exactly where it comes from, but I feel like it's a few things. It's almost this need to prove that we are mothers and we can take care of it and we can do all of the things. I think some of it is just wanting to prove it to ourselves. I think there's this kind of sense of competition. I think social media makes it so much worse that we see all these other moms doing all these things and we think we should be too, but little do we little do we know they have a whole team of, nannies and helpers, and they're not actually doing any of this by themselves. And I think, and some of it also is a pride issue. And this is something I have to work on because mine is definitely rooted in pride that it's, well, I can do all of these things. I can prove that I'm the best mom ever and do all the cleaning and take care of the kids and make dinner and run all the errands. Oh, and maybe I should also start a business on the side. Oh, maybe I should go and check out this hobby. And it's like, whoa, let's dial it back
Mm-hmm.
a second. Like, you do not have to. And I think one of the best things I ever read was it was a woman who was complaining about how she felt overwhelmed with all of her tasks and that she felt bad about asking her husband to help. And the woman wrote back and was basically like, it's his house too. And I don't know what it was, but that like flipped a switch for me. And I was like, oh yeah. So if I ask, for help with, let's just say it's vacuuming or doing the dishes or something, that's not a big deal. It's his house too.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's asking my mom, hey, can you come hang out with Ben for a couple of hours so I can get some cleaning done or whatever. It's her grandchild. She wants to see him too. It's a win-win. So I really think when it comes to that guilt, it's just finding a way to take a step back, give it to God first and foremost, and say, hey, I'm seeing this issue in my heart, Lord. I see that I am becoming prideful, that I am, putting this pressure on myself that I don't need to be. Will you remove those scales from my eyes and show me where I can improve in those areas and help me to ask for help and ask God for help first and foremost. And then, figure out who around you can ask for help. And once you start delegating things out a little bit, you will see that mom guilt kind of start to go away a little bit, just because you don't feel like it has to all rest on your shoulders, because it really doesn't need to. we just have this idea in our heads that we need to be the ones to do everything, and we really don't.
And mom, like you were talking about, and mom influencers,
Oh,
on social media, they can be either like super great or
yeah.
just super harmful for your mindset and how
Yes.
you decide you want to parent, because
Yeah.
that's the hard thing too is you are your child's parent. So Sarah from New York who does this with
You're
her
right.
child doesn't mean that Anna in Pella needs to do this with her child. And that's something I struggled with, is
Mm-hmm.
seeing other moms do things and taking it as advice or taking it into consideration
Yeah.
versus I need to adapt this because that must just be the standard.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I saw a mom influencer, and it was so funny. I'd been seeing all this stuff, like I drink tea in the morning to help open up my mind for the day or whatever.
Yes.
And I finally saw a mom on I was on TikTok, and she was like, time to crack open my energy drink for the day and all this different stuff that I was doing. I was like, wow, I feel so seen. Like, you need to
Yes.
find that person, whether even that,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're not on social media and that's just a peer of yours, a friend of yours, like find that person that helps you feel seen, because then you're
Yes.
like, okay, maybe this isn't as bad as I'm making this
Oh, yeah.
seem. Or even like when it came to trying new foods with Autumn for the first
Mm-hmm.
time, I struggled with that
Oh, yeah.
so hard,
Mm-hmm.
so hard, because I was so afraid of choking. It's a fear and that's been instilled in me by my father.
Oh, no.
I I can't handle it. Just even with her coughing, I'd have to like
Oh.
leave the room because I'd just start bawling insanely.
Oh.
And so,
Poor thing.
I felt like we were kind of behind when it came to her eating. Like she
Sure.
was kind of eating purees, and then I would be scrolling on social media and be like, "Well, my 6 month old has a full rare steak in front of him," and it's
Yes.
like, if that's your 6 month old, that's awesome. I
Right.
was like, but that's not mine. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind. And then it's like you need, like I said, you need to find the other women that help you feel seen,
Yes.
especially when you see their children and they're laughing and they're playing and they're thriving and
Mm-hmm.
clearly, they're decent parents. It's like, okay, especially when you find those kinds of influencers or friends who have older kids who are doing the same things you're doing and help you feel that way. It's like, okay, clearly, I mean, their kids are still running around like
Right.
they're doing something right. So clearly
Yes.
what I'm doing. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make
Totally.
sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I would agree with that because I think a lot of what you're seeing and who you surround yourself with is going to shape a lot of how you're feeling about things. And if you're just seeing, women who have these perfectly curated lives and everything is easy breezy and great, and their kid, is super advanced on milestones and they take their kids to all these activities. Oh, and the mom, works full time and has a side
Mm-hmm.
hustle. It's just, if you look at that, you're going to feel like you're never enough. But if you find other women, whether it's influencers or just, people around you that are like, no, I'm in the trenches here. We're doing the best we can. The kids are taken care of. I'm taken care of. My husband has what he needs. That's going to be a lot more grounding and a lot more reassuring because honestly, most of us, well, actually, none of us have it all figured out. Most of us are just doing the best we can. It helps to, have women around you that, have kids that are slightly older because they can give you some really, appropriate advice and be like, yeah, here's what we did. This is what worked for us. Take it or leave it. It definitely helps to have that support. But yeah, I would say just be mindful of the content that you're consuming and the people that you surround yourself with. And if you have a friendship that's making you feel bad, it might be time to hit pause on that if it's not, bringing you up.
And just finding women who are honest, like
Yes.
that's so real, like things that are just like unedited and
Yeah.
not totally fake. Because
Right.
that same woman, she went on a vacation with her children. It was so funny. She was showing everybody getting ready, and all of the kids were screaming in the background behind her. And she just looked at the camera and she's like, all right, I'm instantly regretting this. I was like, yeah.
Yep.
And she was like, the next time you see me, we'll probably just be driving home because I'm done.
I
Just
love
funny
that.
things like that where you're
Yeah.
like, thank you for showing me that it's not just, you know, Emmanuel, Samuel, come drink your chia seeds in the morning so that we can, align our chakras. Like,
Right.
and if that's you, great, but
Right.
that's not you, so not great. You know,
Exactly.
you're
Exactly.
not
Let's be
not
honest.
and it just is nice and refreshing sometimes to see other women who are honest that, being a mom is genuinely the best gift and the best blessing I've ever received,
Yes.
but it is also the biggest test of my patience.
Mm-hmm.
The most, sometimes it can be very frustrating, very overwhelming. And to see other moms say, and that's okay, because
Yeah.
both of those things can be this, both of those things can be true at the same time.
Yes.
It's just, it's very, very reassuring.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I went on X. So as we're kind of closing down, I went on X and I kind of put out, what were things about being postpartum that you didn't know? And so I thought I'd read a few of some of what I got. And I'll start with this one specifically because I did not breastfeed Autumn.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a decision I made.
Yeah.
I basically passed out after I gave birth, and they were like, she needs to eat. And so my husband gave her formula, and then we just kind of stuck with it as time went on, and then we just never really got off of it.
Yeah.
And so this person says, Homestead Wife says, they didn't know how hungry and thirsty she would be after while she was breastfeeding. She would have had way more easy snacks on hand. So what is it
Yes.
about, breastfeeding that makes you so hungry and thirsty? And what's your kind of advice to other women who are going to be going into a journey of breastfeeding?
Yeah, absolutely. So breastfeeding is very energy consuming. So you actually need more calories while you're breastfeeding than you technically do in pregnancy. So ACOG recommends that breastfeeding mothers should eat around an additional 450 to 500 calories a day. So that's somewhere around 2,000 to 2,800 calories, depending on what your baseline is. So it's because your body's just telling you, hey, I need more calories to make this milk, because it's taking in all of the nutrients that it needs for the milk. And I mean, really, and same thing with the water. It needs water to be able to convert all the substances into breast milk. And what's kind of crazy is your body will prioritize nutrients to the baby. So if you are, iron deficient, or excuse me, if your baby needs more iron in those first couple of months, it's going to take a whoop right from your iron stores. So that's why it's really, really important to make sure that you are eating enough calories, but also eating enough nutrient dense food. So I like to do lots of, I do like meat sticks, beef jerky, things like that. Those are very high in iron. Protein is the name of the game. So if you do dairy, you can do cheese sticks. You can do lots of eggs. Those are great. You can do granola bars, protein bars, fruit, vegetables, kind of whatever is easy. I'm really, my biggest advice for breastfeeding snacks is anything you can eat one-handed. So if you are capable of eating cottage cheese one-handed, and put the bowl on a chair or something, great, you do you. But yeah, just whatever you can eat. The best piece of advice I received was from my doula when I had Ben. And she basically said in those first couple of weeks, anytime the baby is eating, you need to be eating. This is just because you're just so busy and you're so tired in between that the idea of, sitting down and eating a whole meal can be really tricky. But if you're breastfeeding, you're kind of stuck in one place. So you might as well eat. And it's just a way to make sure you're getting enough of those calories in. And then for water, and honestly, I use it even when I'm not breastfeeding, but I have a 40-ounce tumbler right next to me, and I just drink it all day long because breastfeeding women need around 100 ounces of water every day. And we also want to make sure you're getting lots of electrolytes with it, because electrolytes those are what are going to pull the water into your cells and actually hydrate you. So electrolytes are basically kind of the spark plugs of the cell, so to speak. That's things like sodium, potassium, magnesium. I love magnesium. We all need more of it. And you can do that through like using real salt. You can do things like Redmond's Relight. You can put that in your water. Elements, another one. Some people use Liquid IV, things like that. Just trying to make sure that you are getting enough of those minerals, because that's going to build up your milk, make it nutrient dense, and pull that water into those cells. So lots and lots of eating and drinking. And actually, if you're feeling super thirsty but when you start breastfeeding, that's a good sign, because that means your baby is taking in that milk. So it's not a bad thing.
And then some of the other ones I got, we kind of already touched on, but I'm just going to kind of zoom through them and read them just so,
Yeah.
again, like we were talking about, just so that other women and moms out there know that, women have gone through this and that they're not as alone. So Mackenzie said, I had no idea how long it would take my body to heal physically, on top of keeping a tiny human alive, keeping your household in order, and keeping yourself alive on no sleep. You also
Mm-hmm.
have a physical body that is very wounded, which we touched on, and that
Yeah.
is so
Yeah.
true. There were so many sleepless nights, so many nights where I felt like I was an absolute zombie.
Oh, yeah.
Taylor said, when they say you need to take it easy, you really do need to take it easy, even if you feel like you're good. I even made that mistake with my third. Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
you're preaching it.
Yep.
You're preaching it to the choir, girl.
100%.
That we just talked about that. It's my biggest regret, and
Yeah.
I shouldn't have pushed myself.
Yeah.
And then Jess says, I felt strange, just off, not quite right. At 6 weeks, suddenly I felt normal again. It wasn't as bad with my others because I was prepared for it, but it was really scary the first time because I'd wanted to be a mom my whole life. And then it's strange slash not great, which made me feel even worse. And we kind of touched
Mm-hmm.
on that too,
Yeah.
just like with postpartum guilt, it doesn't always have to be, oh, I need to be doing this. I need to be doing this. Sometimes it's like, I don't want to be doing this. I
Yes.
don't want to be doing that. And I definitely had those moments too, especially, the alarm goes off in the middle of the night and you have to get up and do that feed, when they're first
Yes.
born and you're like, I just don't want to. But
Yes.
it's like, and it's horrible to say, but it's like, that's how
No.
you feel
Yeah.
because you're also trying to take care of yourself and it
Mm-hmm.
can be overwhelming. Do you have anything
Oh, yeah.
to say about that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it really is. And that I think is one of the most challenging parts of postpartum. Like you said, you're trying to take care of this baby, but you're also trying to heal and recover. So that's where, that being able to delegate, being able to ask for help, whatever that looks like for you. If that is, some people will split shifts with their significant other so that one person is sleeping while the other person is awake and caring for the baby. If that looks like having, your mom come over and hold the baby during the day so you can get a nap in. Some people will even use something called a postpartum doula, which basically the postpartum doula takes care of the baby through the night and just brings the baby in to nurse, but then is, up with the baby the rest of the night. Whatever that looks like for you, whatever your resources are, really just use them. This does not need to be a solitary journey. You don't need to be doing absolutely everything by yourself. Use the people that you have around you. Ask questions. Don't Google things at 2 a.m. Nothing good ever comes from that. But just try and do the best you can to nourish yourself, rest when you can, take care of the baby, soak up those snuggles, and, use the people around you because they are there. And I promise you, somebody wants to hold a baby.
Yes. And I feel like we touched on a lot in this episode. Is there anything that I'm missing? Is there any piece of advice or any just words of wisdom that you want to share before we end?
Yeah, I would just say, as you are putting together your birth plan, as you are, putting together your labor prep, as you're, stocking up on your postpartum supplies, have a good and honest conversation with your support person before you deliver. Just talking about, hey, like, this is what I've learned as I've been researching things. This is what I'm feeling anxious about. This is what I'm feeling really confident about. Just kind of going into it so you both know what to expect. Because I think a lot of guys just don't know. Probably all they've been told is, okay, we're going to come home with the baby and the baby needs to eat every now and then. And yeah, we might be a little tired. Then she goes to the OB and in 6 weeks she's cleared and we can, get back to normal stuff. And in actuality, postpartum ebbs and flows. So being able to kind of prepare your support person, whether that's, a spouse or a mom or whoever you're going to have with you, just so they kind of know what's coming up too, because preparation really is key. And if you guys have expectations ahead of time of like, yeah, there's going to be, weeks and weeks where we are just rocking and holding this baby and, it's going to want to nurse a ton and we just feel like we're never going to sleep. If you know that that's what's going to happen ahead of a time, it's not nearly as overwhelming as, getting into it and realizing that, you haven't seen the sun in 4 or 5 days. So just talk with your support person, have some plans in place, and above all else, meal prep. Freeze some meals because the last thing you want to do is cook when you're home with a new baby.
Yes. And that's also something I didn't do and also something I didn't regret. I regret, and my bank account regrets that
Right?
very much as well.
Yes, we ate a lot of Chipotle after Ben. That was not great. So this time around, we were well stocked, and Aaron had a smoker, and so we either were eating stuff out of the freezer or we ate a lot of beef brisket, and it was great.
Which is good for you because
Yeah,
as much as I hate to admit it, Chick-fil-A isn't the best food for you. It's not
No,
100% healthy.
no. It does taste
I'll
good
never
though.
repeat that after I say that again tonight, but it really isn't. But we ate so much of that
Yes.
after autumn, and you just got to do what you got to do
That's
sometimes.
exactly. And if you don't meal prep, it's fine. You will survive. But it definitely makes things a little bit easier and just one less thing to have to worry about. Even if it's just something you can, throw in the crock pot real quick. It makes a big difference.
Well, thank you so much for joining me again. I feel like this episode and the last episode were so good and I really appreciate it. And this was Let's Talk episode 15. Let's talk about postpartum.